Hello and welcome to Bulimia Sucks. My name is Kate Hudson Hall, and thank you so much for listening. This is a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on an eating disorder. And episodes include personal stories of where they are now and their difficult journeys and their steps taken into recovery, and also to professionals who work with eating disorders. My Bulimia Sucks audiobook is now live on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. And if you would be interested and would like a free copy of this, then email me at katehudsonhall@gmail.com, and then I can send you the code so you can download it for free. Now, the other thing that I've been working on is the coloring books. So they're out now on Amazon, and there's a range of them. So we've got one for bulimia, anorexia, and binge eating. And then I've also made one for anxiety. And they're stress relieving coloring books. And they display a collection of 35 relaxing and easy to color patterns, mandalas. And they also include quotes of wisdom. And then on the opposite page is a question about that quote and what you can learn from that quote and how you can incorporate it into your everyday life. So I'm very excited about my coloring books because they, for me, have been very therapeutic even to make, let alone color. So if you wanted to check them out, if you go to Amazon and put my name in, which is Kate Hudson Hall, they will all come up. Now, I'm very excited today because our guest is Kimberly Spencer. Now, Kimberly is an award-winning high-performance trauma-informed coach and trainer. She is an Amazon best-selling author, a TEDx speaker, which we want to hear all about, and the founder of crownyourself.com, helping visionary leaders transform their self-limiting stories, build their empire, stand out fearlessly, and make the income and impact that they truly deserve. From her entrepreneurial beginnings at selling 5 bags of glitter water to her neighbors, to becoming an award-winning screenwriter, certified Pilates instructor, Miss Congeniality, and 6 times WEGO Health Activist Award nominee, Kimberly is proof that it's better to make your own mold than to conform to somebody else's. Today, she's here to share with us her journey that she had with 10 years of bulimia. So, Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us.
I love your introduction, your vocal tone and inflection, Kate. My husband's a voice actor, and you have a fantastic voice.
Oh, that's very kind. I'm not too sure, but thank you. Thank you.
It is a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners.
I'm so excited that you're here. Now, I asked you just a moment ago if you had a funny story, and you off the cuff came up with, I think, a fascinating story. So would you like to share that with us, Kimberly?
Yeah, well, having been bulimic for 10 years, I was bulimic from the age of 11 to 21. I got very comfortable with throwing up, and then once I transformed my relationship with bulimia, like I hate throwing up. It's just awful.
Yeah.
However, nothing has made me want to do it more than tasting my son's poop. So my son was 2 years old. We were sitting on the couch and he was eating this toast with fig butter on it. And I was just marveling at just how blessed I was. We were having a beautiful moment, and he was just like snuggled up against me, and I was looking outside and hearing the birds and having my morning coffee. And like, I used to play this game with him where he would give me his hands and I'd go, nom, 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 nom.
Yeah.
And I said, and so suddenly I was just like marveling, and I just look at his hands and I go, nom, 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 and they're like, what did I, oh my God. And I grabbed the baby. I ran. My husband had just come downstairs, and it was the morning. I was like, take him. I ate poop.
Help me.
I was like ferociously brushing my teeth and like, how do you get this? It's like, it's a taste that you cannot get out of your mouth. It is awful.
Is it?
And it taught me such a valuable lesson because like for me, I can find a silver lining in a lesson in pretty much anything. And the only thing that would help it was actually me sitting back and actually eating food again. That was the only thing that would take the taste away. But like that required me to like look at food and put it in my mouth when meanwhile like my taste buds were just so horrified and disgusted. But after having I think I had like a slice of toast really quickly. After having that, it took it away. It was gone. So the taste went away. It
God
was
for life,
oh,
though, I can tell.
it was not a pretty scene.
I bet your husband wondered what was going on, what the
Yep.
traumatic moment was all about.
My son was also wondering. He was like, "What happened?" I didn't realize at the same time he stuck his hands out. He does it a lot. Like he's now a 4-year-old boy, but like he stuck his hand into his diaper
As
to
they
feel around. There was a messy there, so I learned always to smell and check before I do.
Oh, I love that. That's a great story. Oh, not such a good experience though. So now, Kimberly, so let's begin with your difficult journey with your bulimia. So
Yeah,
you
so
were young, really young.
I was very young. Yeah, I was about 9 when I first started dieting, and that seems very young, but at the same time, the stats show that between 9 and 11 is when people, girls in particular, start really nitpicking against their bodies. They start dieting, and same with 9 to 11 is such a precarious years for just I'm hyper aware of those years now that my son is 4 already, and I'm like, oh, in 5 years he'll be at that prime age where you're getting social influences and you're questioning. And I'd grown up with some very poor resources with learning how to deal with emotions. I grew up with an addict for a father, and my mom was the quintessential codependent. My dad would repress and suppress and try to escape from his emotions by drugs and alcohol. And my mom was just like, she's very practical. So, like, she doesn't believe in big emotions. And meanwhile, I was blessed to them as their child, as a very big emotional child with big feelings. And I also saw the hypocrisy in my dad because I saw, that he would come home sometimes sober and sometimes not. And I would hold him to that standard of like sobriety. And nobody wants their 5-year-old challenging their behavior. And like our children can be our greatest mirrors and reflections of us. And I know that now having my own. But my dad wasn't in that place to like want to question his behavior. He just was struggling, like just using his addiction as a coping mechanism. Now I know that the addiction got worse during those formative years because that was how he was grieving the death of his parents.
Yeah.
And so I was taught some very, very poor resources growing up about how to process emotions. Was taught that they were bad, that they were manipulative. And so if you felt them, you shove them down, and then maybe time and again they can explode, and that's just how you process. And then once you explode, then everyone feels like this little bit of release, and then you never talk about it again. And so that was exactly like what I physiologically manifested with bulimia. That was what bulimia was. I was shoving down my emotions, and I was physically shoving them down with food until one day that I would just spew them up.
Yeah,
And
and I think
back,
this is a perfect example. So your dad, the way he would deal with his emotions is to reach out for alcohol. And for you, your way of suppressing them was to use the food.
yeah, and I grew up with very weird eating habits too, because my mom, while she was always into health, She always was a little overweight after she had given birth to me, and I still to this day have to remind her to say nice things about herself, because she always would compare herself to her 20 or 30-year-old version of how she looked, and never really loved how she looked for the history of my life.
Right.
And so I would see her go on tons of diets. And then my dad, whenever he would want to get sober, because he did actively try, and he would go through periods, but once he just switched his addiction to focusing on his body. And so at the same time, as a high achiever, I started adopting all these beliefs that maybe if I was skinny enough, then my dad would stop drinking. Maybe if I was smart enough, then my dad would stop drinking. Maybe if I was good enough, perfect enough. So I became a perfectionist, a high achiever, a straight A student. And I was really hyper focused in the dance world on wanting to becoming a prima ballerina. And that didn't really help either, because at 9, my dance teacher told me to start dieting,
Oh, of
because I was
course,
getting a wee
yes.
bit of a tummy. And that kind of crushed me with the joy that I had for dancing. And it was such a weird moment, because I remember her telling me like, "Oh, we'll just stop eating around 4." And I was like, "Well, that's weird, because I'm up until like 7 or 8, and it didn't make sense to me." But I tried it anyways. And then meanwhile, I would start reading my mom's diet books from the 80s, and I tried like all the diets, you name it, I tried it. Um, and I even tried a diet where you could only eat pineapple like for
Oh
dinner.
gosh.
And so
No.
was trying all these things to like try to control these big emotions that I would feel. I mean, my friends from childhood remember that, because even while my parents were dealing with addiction, they were also fundamentalist Christian. And
Right.
so when I would explode with anger, and looking back now, I was angry at the hypocrisy that I would see of the behavior of my parents. Um, when I would explode with anger, they would corral me in. Normally, I would like explode, have a big emotional tantrum,
Breakdown. Mm.
jump out the window. Like I was on the first floor. I was totally safe, but I would leap out the window. Very dramatic. I was very dramatic about it. And I would run into the back. I would just like and scream at the moon, and then they would corral me back inside and like pray for my anger issues. And so it created a lot of shame on top of the anger that I felt. Instead of asking me why I was so angry, they just would suppress it with shame. And they didn't know, they were doing the best that they could with the
Yeah,
resources
yeah.
they had available. So that it was that experience that I didn't know how to process these big feelings. And I thought, well, maybe these are bad. Maybe I need to like not feel them. And so I would try to numb in all the different ways. So I would try to numb by not eating at school. Like my friends would always see me just like drink a Diet Coke for lunch, which is beyond me because I haven't touched a Coke in the past like 10 years. But like I would just drink a Diet Coke, of course, because I'm 9, because that's what I needed to be drinking. Per my perception that, oh, I drink Diet Coke, it makes you skinny. No, it doesn't. It's the biggest myth ever.
Mm.
And then I would have all these weird eating habits, and my friends would always point it out to me, and I'd say, oh, well, I'm going out for lunch with my mom, which she would take me out for like a nice lunch instead of school cafeteria lunch. And she didn't know what to feed me. And so I would eat like McDonald's for breakfast. And so I never really had a solid food foundation or a good relationship with food. And then at 11, I was I'd been struggling with dieting and food for about 2 years. And then at 11, I was watching this commercial that was all about like healthy pills. And I said, well, my mom has tons of vitamins. So I took a handful of vitamins, and I thought, well, maybe this will make me, maybe if I'm healthy with all these vitamins, then I'll feel better. And so I
Mm.
took a
Yeah.
handful of vitamins, and one got stuck in my throat. And like, if you've ever had that experience where a vitamin gets stuck in your throat, it's awful. And you're like, I don't know how to deal with this. And so I tried to like throw it up. And I did, and I ended up throwing up like a whole lunch that I had binged on,
Oh, I
and I
see.
suddenly felt this momentary peace.
Oh my gosh. Right.
And from that, I thought, well, it started the programming, because we were programmed with our feelings. Like it started the programming of like, oh, throw up, feel better,
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
peace.
Yeah.
because that's really what I was searching for.
Just that
And
one
so
experience was the seed.
yeah, that was the root experience, and then it grew for about 16 years. I wasn't like consistently throwing up until I got into high school. And then once I got into high school, I was in all the honors classes because again, I had to be the perfect straight A, high achiever. And I went into a different high school, and this high school was 10 times harder than my previous school. And I thought, well, I'm a high achiever and I'm smart. And it challenged my identity beliefs of being smart because suddenly, for the first time in my life, I was struggling to to achieve at the level that I was used to of just easily and effortlessly coasting and just getting straight A's.
Right.
And so those, because it challenged my identity, I started trying to control my circumstances even more, and the throwing up became more normal. And then around the age of 16, I remember I was suffering. Like, I knew I had a problem. I knew what I was doing wasn't working. I what felt constantly overweight, and I wasn't, but I just didn't like the way I looked. I'd stopped dancing because I at least knew that that was a trigger environment for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the way I looked. And I remember coming out to my parents and letting them know. And I said, I think I might have a problem. I'm throwing up my food. And my mom was silent, and she just kind of like was shocked. And my dad goes, "Oh, I do that sometimes."
Oh my gosh.
And so he brushed it off as normal, and my mom was still concerned. And so after a few weeks, I remember this moment where I had been I we had a family dinner. It was very rare for us to ever eat around a table together. And we had a family dinner, and through having that family dinner, I went upstairs to do my homework, and that was totally normal. That was exactly the truth. I was going to do my homework. I just had a pit stop along the way. And the way my parents built the second story of our house growing up was, it didn't have a lot of really good insulation. So I'd gotten really good at like very sneakily crossing across the floor, and I knew what floorboards not to touch because I knew those would creak. And I went into the bathroom, and suddenly I hear this bam, bam, bam up the stairs, and it's my mom, and she flings open the door, and she pulls me from the toilet and tackles me to the ground. And I was so mad at her. I was so mad at her in the moment. And I was like, how dare you? And all the emotions came forth from that experience of being like, she was taking away my control to be able
Yeah.
to control. I was pissed, and I fought like hell. She ended up tackling me to the ground, sitting on me. And she held my hands back, and she said, "Kim, I am not going to let you kill yourself. I love you too much." And it was in that moment that I realized bulimia is just a slow form of suicide. And I wanted to find a different way. And so I thought, maybe if I tried some new diet restrictions, maybe if I went vegetarian. So I tried vegetarian, and I actually started gaining weight now because I was eating only pasta. And I was like, well, I don't think this is it. And it didn't feel right in my body. And then I read a book called Skinny Bitch, that's all about veganism. And I thought, well, the book really highlighted some of the cruelty that happens to animals. And I
Yeah,
thought,
I've
well,
read
maybe
that book years ago. It was in like the
yeah, it was a
90s or
long time
something.
ago, back in 2003.
Mm.
And I read it, and I thought, well, maybe if I'm ingesting animals that are killed inhumanely, then maybe that's contributing to this, like my own self-loathing and my own cruelty to myself. And so I became a vegan. And with this one, it was different than any diet because I knew that my life was at stake, and I wanted to try to cultivate more peace. And if that came from like trying to help animals, then and if that was helping me, then that was what I was going to do. And so I felt more peaceful because I was feeling like I was in some way of service to animals in some way. And also I was much more vigilant about it, and I didn't do a diet like I had done in the past, where in the past, like my whole family would go on diets at the same time. Like I did Atkins when I was 10 with my entire family. Um,
My God.
and and this one, I didn't want to enroll anyone else. I just made this for me. And what going vegan for 6 years, I was vegan for 6 years, what that really taught me was I learned more about plants. I learned more about eating fruits, vegetables, nuts, because I didn't have much else to choose from. And that was really powerful for me, was learning how to nourish my body, because it started me researching different things that I could eat. And so I actually started eating healthy for the first time. I started taking out things that were processed. I started eating more vegetables and more fruits, and being able to it really helped me navigate for those first few years of learning and getting back in touch with my body. Problem was, 6 years into being vegan, I was had massive brain fog. I had no energy, and I was anemic. And I thought, I don't know if this is still right for me, because the only thing I craved for 6 years was a burger. It was a big giant steak. And I remember I was vegan for 6 years, and within that 6 years, I also had a lot of freedom, because I ended up graduating high school. I dropped out of college, even though I had two scholarships before I started, to start an acting class. And it was in this acting class where I was actually learning how to feel again. I saw the principal of this acting class, and by principal, I don't mean like the principle, but I mean like the core key concept of this acting class
Oh,
was
yeah.
living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And I didn't know what it meant to live true to myself, because I'd been lying about my emotions, and that everything was fine, and I was always fine, and things were perfect all the time. And I actually had to learn how to feel. And it was also the first area where I was introduced to personal development. Because when I first enrolled for this acting class, which is where Sean Astin studied, and Ashley Judd and James Franco, so a lot of working actors and celebrities had gone through this acting class called Playhouse West in North Hollywood. And my acting teacher gave me a book when I first joined, a syllabus with 50 books that I needed to get, that were like to read. And straight A student, I'm going to read all of them. So I went to Barnes and Noble, and there was one on the first page, and it literally had this big box around it. It said, "This is the most important book you will ever read." And I was like, "Oh, I'm excited. What's this
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to teach
yeah,
me about
yeah.
Hollywood? What's this going to teach me about my career? And I, for the first time in my life, I walk into the self-help section of the bookstore, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And I pull the book off the shelf, and I was like, what do habits have to do with Hollywood and with succeeding? And I looked, and I opened this book, and I thumbed through it, and I was floored when I read this piece in it. And I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't remember the exact quote, but it was basically, you can choose your emotional state. And I was like, what? I'd never been taught that. I'd never been taught that. And so I was looking through this book, and it was Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
And by reading this book, I knew, it was like suddenly I learned that there was a new language that was possible. It's like when you hear somebody speak French for the first time, and you see them speaking in a conversation, and they're speaking French, and you know they're having a conversation, you know they're speaking things to each other, but you just don't know the language yet. And I this book gave me the opportunity to learn a new language about
Yeah,
myself.
yeah, yeah. It is. It's like a whole
And
new language. All of these
oh, it was
different
amazing.
behavioral changes that you make. That's what it's like, learning a new language.
And being able to learn that language, it took a few years. I'll be honest, it took a few years to learn that language.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, I was looking for a way to support myself as I pursued my career in acting and screenwriting and in entertainment. And so I didn't want to wait tables. I didn't want to be around food. I didn't want to also be a server. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just wasn't for me. I wanted to find something that I could actually help with people. I wanted to serve people, and I wanted to have a job that I had some sort of agency around my schedule. And I was kind of like looking at what I could do. And it was at that time that a friend of mine from acting class said, can I give you some free Pilates lessons? And I thought, well,
Ah,
Kate Hudson does Pilates and she's pretty fit. And my agents were wanting me to lose weight, and I didn't want to do it from the way that I'd done it before. So I was like, I was trying to find a healthy way. And she said, well, can you do Pilates? And it's, Kate Hudson did Pilates. So I said, well, let me try it. And it was the first time after 30 days of doing it that I actually felt good in my body. I saw
yeah,
results. I dropped a jean size without trying, because I was toning my body, and now knowing what I know as a high performance coach, I was training my parasympathetic nervous system.
yeah,
My my autonomic sympathetic nervous system had been on overdrive for all of my life. I'd been in fight, flight, freeze constantly.
yeah,
Anxiety and depression, the highs, the lows, but never really finding that oscillation, that natural oscillation, because I hadn't been taught those resources.
yeah, yeah,
And through teaching Pilates, through starting Pilates, I suddenly was tapped into, like, I suddenly feel good in my body. Like, this feels different. And
yeah.
within 3 months,
So,
I said,
so can I just
I have to,
interrupt you? So, can I
oh
just
yeah.
say, so for people that don't know, so with regards to your nervous system, so you have the sympathetic nervous system, then you have the parasympathetic nervous system. So just to explain, so the sympathetic nervous system is that real tense nervous system that you fall into, that fight or flight state. And then you've got the parasympathetic, which is your normal, calm, relaxed state. So when you're super stressed, you can get into a habit, a pattern of just constantly staying in that worrying pattern of that there is going to be a non-existent threat in the future, and you can stay right up there in that sympathetic nervous system. So it's finding the tools to be able to reduce that and transfer over to back into your normal natural state, into the sympathetic nervous system. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to explain that because you were talking about that
Oh,
so people
I
understand.
love the fact that you did explain that, because it also, the sympathetic is something that can trigger the triggers.
Yes,
Like, I
yeah,
found that with when I would start to get on that hamster wheel of the thought patterns of, like, I don't want to throw up. I really don't want to throw up. And I would start thinking, and I would start being on that, well, I feel fat after this. And I would start going down that pattern and that road. That's when your sympathetic nervous system starts to give those spikes of cortisol, and you're looking for that release to be able to suddenly go from like either fighting or flighting into, like, being able to just freeze and have that peace. And that's really what the peace was that I felt the first time that I had thrown up. It was just being able to be in that freeze mode where it's almost like time stands still.
yeah, just
But that's
briefly though.
not
Mm.
that's not real, like, that's not life. Like, that's when an animal who is, like, we're biologically wired for both. And the sympathetic nervous system is a powerful nervous system. It's not bad. There's no one, it's not that one's good or one's bad. It's just, typically, especially in modern day society, we train the sympathetic more, and we aren't conditioned to do the parasympathetic, to activate the parasympathetic. And you can activate the parasympathetic from Pilates, yoga, qigong,
Mindfulness. Mm.
breath work, mindfulness, just simple breathing. You can activate your parasympathetic nervous system within 90 seconds by taking a nice inhale and exhale.
Yeah, and the important thing there is
And
that you exhale for longer than you inhale.
longer than you
Because when
inhale.
you inhale, you access the sympathetic nervous system. But when you exhale all the way down for maybe the count of 8 or longer if you can, then you're accessing the parasympathetic nervous system.
And
To
you can do that within
find that.
90 seconds. And so you
Yes,
can do
and
that
you
at
like
any
that.
time during the day to practice. But I didn't realize that I was training my nervous system. And so I immediately knew I had to teach this. I knew that teaching Pilates also would give me some level of agency over my schedule. And so within 6 months, I was certified. And within a year, I was the highest paid youngest instructor at the studio, high achiever. And
Oh, I
it was
love
also
it.
because I was teaching from a place of authenticity. So like, when I would train clients, I would always come from the place that, like, I did not like exercise. Like, hated I didn't know what I was doing at the gym. I couldn't be in a dance environment because it was too triggering for me. And I couldn't run a mile to save my life. I was an exercise-induced asthmatic. Like that's where my body
Right.
had gotten to because my sympathetic nervous system was so on overdrive. And it was through Pilates and through teaching and ultimately through leading my clients, I led from a place of authenticity, letting them know I didn't have it all figured out, but I did figure out this
Mm.
one thing, and it was called Pilates, and I can teach that to you. And through teaching, I started to hear people's stories. And I also removed myself from the environment of my parents' home because I made enough money to be able to go live on my own, that I removed myself from that environment. And so then there I was teaching 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, hearing multiple story after story, learning different mindsets, being exposed to different experiences. And that's why I love podcasts like yours, Kate, that give people the opportunity to hear different stories,
Yeah.
because our brains are wired to survive. And so our default programming is for survival. And so if we think that we have to live in a reactive or suppress our emotions in order to survive, that's what we're going to do. That's the programming and conditioning that we're exposed to. But what if there was a different way? And what being around 10 people, 10 different people, 60 different people a week, hearing 60 different belief systems, I saw 60 different ways of surviving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
suddenly that got me to start questioning, well, maybe it's a mindset. Maybe it's a belief thing. What if I believe that too? What if I thought that way? What if I chose joy every day? And I started questioning, and I started really doing some deeper
Love.
self-assessment
Yeah.
that then allowed me to question my triggers. Well, why did I throw up? Why did I choose to down a bottle of laxatives? Why did I do this? Well, what triggered me before that? If
Yeah.
this was the result and I'm not liking this result, like what did I do before that? What was it? What was the scenario? Who was I speaking to?
Absolutely. What was I
How was I
thinking? What was, yeah,
yeah.
what was that
And just being
conversation that was going on in my head? Because quite often it's an argument that you're having in your head with yourself. And before you know it, you're in the kitchen eating whatever you can find.
yeah. Yeah, and that it was the power of being able to have that self-assessment. And yes, it happened
Amazing.
initially after I'd been triggered, after I caught myself halfway through a thing of Haagen-Dazs, like at where I was like, whoa, coming to that moment of self-awareness. So but that's the part of the learning process. It's the conscious incompetent stage of the learning process, where you know that there's something that you don't know. You don't know what it is, but you're questioning and figuring it out. So you're looking to what are those triggers beforehand, which then led me to, within a few short years, led me to conscious competence, where I was catching myself seeing, oh, this is going to be a triggering environment for me. I'm going to choose to remove myself. Oh, I'm starting to feel these feelings of anxiety or of depression. Maybe I will go for a run. Maybe I will, do a Pilates session. Maybe I'll call a friend. Maybe it's this person that I'm in a relationship with who's probably not a healthy relationship. So I started to question and really assess my behavior, because and I started to eliminate blame. And that's a huge thing. I wanted the recovery of my eating disorder to be mine. And I look back to my relationship with my dad, and I blamed him for so much because of many childhood experiences that I had. And yet, as an adult, it was never him shoving my finger down my throat. I
Yeah.
had to take ownership that it was
Yeah.
me and that I was the one making those choices. And once I did, I started to shift that if I'm at cause for my life, if I'm taking ownership of my results, if I'm taking ownership of the fact that I'm the one who's throwing up my food, then maybe I can take ownership of what's causing that effect. And I started to put myself more at cause. And by doing that, and it's not a comfortable conversation to have with yourself on a regular basis, because nobody likes being at fault. Nobody likes making mistakes. Nobody likes feeling like they're wrong. And so typically our identity is so attached. We think we're so right in who we have been
Yeah.
that we're holding on with that fear of being wrong about who we are. But as Malcolm Goldsmith, I think it's Malcolm Goldsmith said, what got you here won't get you there. And so in order to have that full-bodied transformation, that is that requires you to be wrong about who you have been, the habits that you've had. This is very much what my TED Talk was about the power of decision making and choosing, deciding to make a new decision, deciding to believe a new belief system, deciding to think a new thought about yourself and just question it. I like to think of beliefs. Like I used to have a belief that I was fat. I think many people have had that. And I started to question that and just try on the belief, like, what if my body is perfect? What if my body is amazing? And at first it felt like, the first time you try on a new pair of jeans and you're like, this doesn't quite fit right. And I'm not quite sure. And so, but then as you wear them more often, they start to feel better on you and they start to stretch out and they start to adapt to you as you adapt to them. And that's what belief systems do is if we can just allow ourselves to try on a new wardrobe, if we can just allow ourselves to try on a new belief system, to maybe try on, oh, I realize that I'm waking up frustrated with myself every morning and I feel not good enough. Well, what if I woke up and decided, because it's going to be a conscious decision at first, and decided that I'm going to do everything I can to feel amazing about my body? What if I decided that I'm going to do everything and what thoughts would I think if I thought that? And so the
Absolutely.
better
And what
you
image
get,
would I have in my head if I were to think that way? And to
yeah,
focus on that and
yeah,
make that image colorful, bright, big, and really imagine and step into it and see what it would feel like.
and have it be close to you as well. Have that image be close to you, whether you're embodying it or just like near you. Like if you see that image of who you desire yourself to be, of whether it's, just loving yourself more, bring that image in your mind, see that image and bring it as close to you as possible. And that will also help with bringing that belief system closer
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being able to adapt it. And I remember the moment that I realized that I was completely free of bulimia. I realized, and it was when it was after I'd started eating meat again. I'd found something that, because the first time I bit into a burger after 6 years of being a vegan, it was a protein burger from In-N-Out, and it was like heaven. Within 5 minutes, I had energy, and my body was thanking
Gosh.
me for honoring it with what it needed, which was iron and protein. And I started to develop that conversation with my body. So I used to think of my body as like horrible and that I couldn't trust it and that I had to control it. Well, basically, I was in a narcissistic, abusive relationship with myself.
Yes. Yes.
And being able to look at like, well, what if my body were a person, would I treat her that way? Like, would I want to drag her to the gym and say, I'm going to force you to work out for 30 minutes, even though and you're going to like it? No, no. So being able to have that relationship, and I started to cultivate a relationship where I wasn't the one trying to tell my body everything that she needed to do. I started to ask my body, what did she need from me, rather than the
Yeah.
other way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was from that suddenly my body would say, take a nap instead of, running 3 miles.
Yeah.
It
And
would
I think a lot of
say,
people aren't aware that their mind is connected to their body. And if you
yeah,
were to tune into your body and say, what do I really need what do I really need right now? An answer will come up. The unconscious answer will come up. It's the first answer that comes into your head, and go with that. Yes, you need to take a nap.
yeah. Your unconscious mind runs your body. I mean, you're not thinking about beating your heart or breathing your lungs or circulating your blood or doing all the other amazing things that your body is currently doing. So when you learn to trust your body, you learn to trust your unconscious mind as well and
And I don't
trust
think
those
people realize
answers.
how powerful their unconscious mind is. They need to go in and do some research about it, because it's so powerful. You can use it to help you to overcome whatever you want to overcome, working with your unconscious mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just recently I've taken 5-HTP for years.
Yes.
And here in Australia, living here, it needs to be prescribed in order to get it. And so when the pandemic hit and we were in lockdown and I was there with a 3-year-old and I was like, I don't have 5-HTP. And I couldn't get a prescription for it. And I was like crap, like I don't want to be on the sharp mood swings, because that's really what
So
it helps.
5-HTP is a natural herbal remedy to be able
Yes.
to lift your spirits.
Yes, it helps with regulating sleep and mood.
Regulating sleep and mood.
Yes.
It helps to
And what I
boost your
found was that for me, it helped to just smooth out the highs and lows that we all experience, because we're having a human experience. And I remember I was going for a run, and I was running, and I was just thinking of like, how can I get my body to shift? And I just remember making an internal subconscious decision where I said, you're going to produce more serotonin, brain. And suddenly, and I'm not saying this is for everyone, and I'm not a medical expert, but I did not feel that I needed it. I didn't feel that I needed 5-HTP. And for a year, until I got pregnant again, I didn't feel that I needed it at all. And so I'd had, like, my mom was able to ship me over some bottles of it from the States. And I still was like, I don't feel like I need it.
So did you actually purposefully say to your unconscious mind, I need to boost my serotonin levels, or
Oh, I intentionally said it, but it was also listening to what my body was saying, where it was just having that conversation. And it was in a state where I was running, which now I now, like, from having gone from being an exercise induced asthmatic to now having run 5, 6 marathons, I run using parasympathetic breathing. So I am activating the parasympathetic nervous system with my breath as I run. So I'm not trying to
I love that. I've run
yeah.
marathons before. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of
Yeah. And so I've gotten into this space where I love running. I haven't done it in a little while since I just gave birth 4 months ago to my second son, but it was from that that listening to my body was in a state of relaxation, and it just kind of knew what it needed. And my brain also, from some of the research that I've done, was like, it needed more serotonin. And I was like, brain, you're just going to produce it. And so my body produces results. And
So you're giving direction to your unconscious mind as they produce more serotonin. And that's what it needs. It needs direction.
well, it's also, it comes down to the belief. It 100% comes down to the belief that you believe that your body's going to produce the results that you are going to that you direct it to do. I remember years after I'd recovered from bulimia, I was teaching a client, and I was pregnant with my first son. And this client had gained about 70 pounds within a year. She was in a very abusive relationship with her boyfriend, and she had been put on birth control pills that jacked her hormones. So suddenly, bam, 70 extra pounds. And she had a lot of fears around weight loss, and there were multiple layers to her story. And I remember her asking me, she's like, Kim, but aren't you scared of, like, not losing the baby weight? And I took a moment to consider the question, because if you allow, like, for example, if I had actually had that, I would have gotten defensive. If I didn't trust my body, I would have been in a state of defense. No, of course I trust my body. Of course that. But that's not how, when you are accepting and you allow for challenging questions and you allow yourself to go inward, that's how you know that the guilt and shame may no longer be there, because you may be allowing for that space to have that deeper conversation with yourself. And I remember I said, okay, I considered your question, and I didn't feel any guilt. I didn't feel any shame. And I checked my body, and I didn't feel any fear. And I just said, no. I said, I know my body will produce the results I want it to produce. I know that I had decided, and I have a belief system that I was just unavailable to hold on to 30 extra pounds of baby weight. I just knew that I trusted my body, that I wouldn't have to force her or push her or do like extra workouts or do like a post baby diet. in order to have her produce a result. I knew that she would guide me to what my answers would be for what I needed to eat to nourish my body and my breastfeeding baby, what I would need to eat to nourish myself, and to allow for any sort of the excess from the pregnancy to just shed away. Within 6 months, I was
love
able to
it. I love it, Kim.
completely transform my body. But it came
Amazing.
from me building up that trust.
Yes.
And that trust was built because I remember the moment that I freed myself from bulimia was I was in the Miss California USA pageant, and it was the first pageant I'd ever done with a bikini. And I had people saying, "Aren't you nervous?" I diligently prepared. It wasn't a force, it wasn't a push. There's a different energy when it's a force and a push and you're trying to control it and manipulate it to do what you want, versus I trusted my body to produce the results from the Pilates and the cardio that I was doing. I did it from a place of love and a different energy. There's a very different energy to exercising because you love yourself versus exercising to punish yourself.
Yeah.
And when you approach it from that energy of love and from like wanting to do something that's good for your body, that feels good, that makes you feel better, that was a space in which I trained to do this pageant. And I remember the moment I walked out on stage in front of 4,000 people in a bikini, and I saw the judges there in the shadows, and I could care less whether they crowned me or not, because I knew I'd crowned myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
knew I'd won. I knew I was free. I knew I was free forever from bulimia.
Yeah. Wow. That pivotal moment. Incredible. Incredible. So tell us, so you've done your TEDx talk, and will you be doing another one?
Oh, of course.
Haha, yes.
Of course.
And so what was your
This is
TEDx
one of many.
talk? What was your TEDx talk about?
It was on becoming a warrior for possibility. So my contention is that we are each living lives. We are each capable of living stories of greater possibility than the one that we're currently telling ourselves. And that people are watching our testimony unfold for what is possible and what we believe is not. And from that perspective, we adopt a role model mindset. And so I want my children to have an amazing relationship with food. I want them to have an amazing relationship with, seeing a strong woman, with seeing a different, level of service. We are each living lives that are capable of greater possibility if we choose to decide to lean into those possibilities. And our bodies are just as capable as well. Our bodies are capable of miraculous transformations.
Wow. So how do people find if they go to TEDx, and then how do they find it?
Yeah, you can search Becoming a Warrior for Possibility, Kimberly Spencer, and you'll find my TED Talk.
I love
or
it.
You can go to my website, crownyourself.com, and all the resources are there as well.
Oh, incredible. Incredible. So, okay, so you're living in Australia at the moment, and what are you doing? What you're teaching?
What am I
Pilates?
doing here in Australia?
Yeah, you're teaching Pilates.
No. I've stopped teaching Pilates years ago. I switched from Pilates into full-time high performance coaching.
Oh, okay.
So I was blessed with having an online business. Back in 2018, I took my business completely online. I closed my Pilates studio, and now I'm very grateful that I made that decision so that we could stay in the beautiful Queensland, Australia. And then from that, I've just built my coaching business. At first, I was teaching body image and wellness coaching, and then that morphed into more neurolinguistic programming, NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis coaching. And then it moved into high performance coaching, really focusing on increasing people's clarity and courage and delivering holistic success. So I don't believe that your business should come at the sake of your body, or your body should come at the sake of your career, or your relationships could come at the sake of your business. I think that you can choose to have it all: a body that you love, a business that fulfills you to the max, and a relationships where you just feel so loved and supported. And that's what I've been able to build for myself. And that's what I enjoy coaching my clients to achieve as well.
Oh, fantastic. So if people want to find out more, then they go to crownyourself.com.
Crownyourself.com. That's
And
where the pre-launch for my book is coming out, Rule Your Body, How to Take Command of Your Health, Love Your Body, and Crown Yourself.
so when does your book come out?
Book is coming out next year in 2022. The date is not specified, but it is coming out next year. So you can get on the pre-waiting list.
And so what is the book specifically about?
It's about the mental shifts and the linguistic shifts that I made in order to recover specifically from bulimia and how you can apply those same strategies into any area of your life. It's basically how to rule your body and do it from a place of love, not manipulation. So there's a bit and have it and build that trust so that you're able to lead your body because we are in our relationships with our body for life. We can change businesses, we can even change husbands, but or partners, but we can never divorce ourselves from our bodies. That is actual death. And so we might want to learn to love our bodies and build a healthy, trusting relationship with our bodies. And the book is really on how to do that.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so interesting. We all need to, we haven't got a date yet, but we need to watch out for it then next year.
Yes, for sure. 2022. I'm very excited for it. It's been my elephant baby, but since my dad passed away in January, a lot of my to-do lists are getting to done. So the TED Talk was one. Our launch of our YouTube channel, Queen TV, was another, and then this book is going to be coming out. And we're aiming for a February launch because that was his birthday.
Oh, perfect. Oh my gosh. So Kim, thank you so much for coming on and joining us. And oh my gosh, it's just been incredible. You're sincere and I don't know, so relevant, but powerful conversation. Oh, it's just going to be really insightful for so many people. So
Thank you so much, Kate. It has been a pleasure being on here with you. And thank you for what you're doing for all the people who are listening and just providing a platform for people to learn different perspectives and that hope is possible.
Yes.
Because it really is. Like
And
when I say that, I don't believe in even using the word recovered, I say transformed because a butterfly doesn't ever go back into being a caterpillar. So you may for all your listeners, you may just be in the cocoon of your own transformation, but there
oh,
is a possibility to be on the other side.
beautiful. Love that. I love that. Oh, well, thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Pleasure to have you on. So that's all for today's episode of Bulimia Sucks. And thank you to everybody for listening. And before we go, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes so you never miss an episode. And let me know what you think and show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Apple iTunes or wherever you may listen. Plus, as I mentioned earlier about my book, Bulimia Sucks, it's out now on Amazon to learn many different techniques to help you to begin to break through your painful bulimic behaviors. And I love to hear what you think. So it'd be great if you could leave a review. So thank you for listening. And I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode.